programs happening here at the Teaneck Public Library. The Friends sponsor this fabulous concert series of really world-class performers. I think we're just really lucky sometime because a lot of really world-class performers, as we have the privilege of having today, live in the Bergen County area. And so if I nag them enough and I become a big enough pain, then they give in, you know. So it's really, we're very, very lucky to have all this fabulous talent. And we also have movies on a Sunday afternoon. Usually we show movies of a socially important issue kind of movie. We had Fannie Lou Hamer, The Life and Times of Fannie Lou Hamer. That was a fabulously important movie. I think every high school person should have to see it, required. And then we have some movies about the environment. We have movies about hot button issues of the day, some documentary and some drama. We had Plaza Catedral, which was a fabulous movie from Peru and was a winner in lots of festivals this last year. And we have coming up, I think this one is not too controversial. I don't think anybody will want to hurt me for this one. Next month, on the 6th of November, Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which I don't think, unless, of course, you know, you hate the French, which there are a lot of people who do, I think this should work. And it really has a nice message behind it, a very positive message about sticking to your guns and realizing your dreams no matter what age, what moment in life you find yourself. So it's a movie about personal endurance, and I think that's nice to remember. Nobody knows the path we're on, so it's good to say, okay, I'll keep going, I'll keep going. And then we also have crochet club and lectures and food cooking demonstrations. We have book signing events. We have drumming events. We have all kinds of fabulous programs here at the Teaneck Public Library. And these programs are brought to you by the Friends of the Teaneck Public Library. And I count many friends among us. You're a supporter of the Teaneck Public Library Friends organization. We're an all-volunteer group of crazy people. We work here, we just don't get paid. So there are some people here from the Friends of the Library too, so I'm very happy for that. After the concert, don't forget to visit the book sale, which is going on. I'm sure you glanced at it earlier, and you'll find and you already bought some things, that's great. You'll find some treasures in there, I'm sure. And now we come to today's program. It's a serious topic, but it's a topic of also journey and self-actualization. Very touching topic. I had the privilege of seeing this performance quite a few years ago, pre-COVID. I forget the COVID years, you know, so I'll say, oh, it was 3 years ago. I really mean 5, but I forget. And we have today a multimedia program. We have a video, we have a story, and we have the fantastic Carolyn Enger to play and tell the story. We also have, and I know you're going to love it, we also have some CDs of Carolyn's. If you have interest in them, they're $15 a piece, and you're welcome to purchase them, and they'll be up here in the front. So if you're interested, that was the commercial. So without further ado, let me introduce to you world-class pianist, Carolyn Enger.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much. So I'll speak to you a little bit about the story behind my project here, and then we will get into the project, and then afterwards I welcome your questions. So I've been reading about this topic and pursuing it probably for over 30 years. Excuse me for a second. There we go. About diversity, tolerance, and identity. This whole project comes out of my family story. My father was a Michelin grade A, and during the film you'll find out what that means. His mother was Jewish and his father was German. And so during the Nazi period, that fact that he was of mixed birth, created a problem for him. He was eventually put into a forced labor camp, but the Nazis didn't know exactly how to handle the Mischlinge, what to do with them, because after all, there was the German aspect and then the Jewish aspect, and so the idea was eventually to exterminate them, but they got to them later in the war. He was put into a forced labor camp in August of 1944. My grandmother, Charlotte Popelauer, who you'll see in the film, she converted from Judaism to Christianity after she married. I think it was a social choice, not anything coming out of her faith or conviction. You remember that in Germany at the time, it was a very secular kind of environment. And initially, my father had been drafted into the army, but then at 1942, a law had been passed that then the Mischlinge had to be kicked out of the army. So he faked a limp with a cane in order that his neighbors shouldn't suspect him. So in the forced labor camp, he'll hear his description. He dug ditches to fortify against the Russian tanks, but of course he said, once the Russian tanks came, they drove right over these ditches. Anyway, the guards could hear the tanks coming and the guards left, and so then the prisoners were able to leave after them. I'm not going to go too much more into his story because you'll hear it in the film. The point of the bigger part of the, in a sense, full circle is that I was baptized as a child. I was raised, my mother's from Philadelphia, and I was raised as a Protestant here in Tenafly, New Jersey. And slowly but surely, I got to hear my father's story. And I guess in college, I had, I wouldn't say a spiritual awakening, I would say more of an identity awakening, that I felt more comfortable in Jewish environments. And so I went through a Reform conversion, and then some years later, I had been thinking about making Aliyah to Israel. And in order to do that, I wanted to be able to be married and or buried there. So I needed to go through an Orthodox conversion, which is what I did as well. So I think I'll leave it at that. The point of the project is that I would like to convey a positive message empowering people with pride and confidence without shame or pressure to hide, acceptance, both internal and external. Ultimately, I hope that it's about peace between us and within ourselves. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Mischling is a mixling. It's a German word for a mixling. You are of mixed race, but it's evenly distributed between two grandparents being Jewish and two grandparents being Aryans. So that was the denomination that they gave us. Half Aryans, half Jews. It was a term that was interchangeable, because since Hitler was not interested in the religion of people, but he considered the Jews an undesirable race. And as far as he was concerned, everybody who descended from Jews, even partially, was undesirable and was uh, not expected to pass on any Jewish blood. Questionnaires were always asking, what's the religion of your grandparents? It never said, what's your religion? That was unimportant. What's the religion of your grandparents? And that automatically branded you as a half-Jew if you said two are Jewish.
Breslau, where my father and my godmother grew up before the war. It is now Wrocław, part of Poland. Many families like the Mendelssohns and my father's, converts who now identified as Christian, found both their lives and their identities disrupted as the Nazis rose to power. Moses Mendelssohn's own descendant, Franz Mendelssohn, joined the Nazi Party while still refusing to renounce the Mendelssohn family name. His daughter said, "I'm proud of the name, but I always had to explain our situation to the authorities. I would often get asked, 'Do you descend from that horrible Jew?'
What was interesting about that family and about a lot of other families in Germany in those days was that the generation of my grandfather were very much assimilated to being German first and Jewish second.
A lot of people, when they talk about the Holocaust, they talk about the Auschwitz, they talk about the concentration camp, they talk about the gas chambers, they talk about the treatment of Jews, and so forth. But when you tell them about the story of the Michelin, that they pop out their eyes and you don't know what we have in mind. But this is Michelin is something that bedeviled the Nazis themselves. They didn't even they didn't know how to handle that. But they thought it was of the greatest importance for them to solve the problem of Michelin. What's the word Michelin? It's a German word. It's no longer used. It's no longer employed. If you check the German dictionary today, doubt whether you'll find the word itself. It's a Nazi word, which implies people who are mixed half-breeds. They're not this and they're not that. What do I mean by that? The Nazis divided the human races genetically by blood, based on racial theories which were common in those days. And the other thing that the Nazis did, they intertwined this racial thinking with this demonic anti-Semitism that was already there, that saw the Jews as being not only that they are stubborn and they don't want to mix actually, or they don't want to convert to the mainstream religion, but they are conniving and they're basically evil. There's something evil about the Jews, but since they are few and since they know that there's something wrong with them, then they're making all the kinds of efforts to get over that by controlling the superior races. Conspiracies like the Protocol of the Elder Design. Okay, the Jews want to dominate the world. How do they do that? Several ways. One way is that by getting their hands on the financial markets of the world, by controlling the money. Number two is by causing the nations of the world to go to war with each other, and by financing these wars, because without money you cannot go to war. And number three is, since their blood is contaminated, is bad, then they try to marry with Aryans in order, it's like a medicine, it's like an injection, in order to better their blood contents. And that is dangerous because that causes the bastardization, that's the term that they use, the bastardization of their offspring. So what we have to do, they said the Nazis, is first of all, we have to remove the Jews from our midst, if we can, and prevent the Jews from having any kind of sexual relations with Aryans, okay? From Jews from contaminating the pure Aryan blood. So they went one step of the Nuremberg Law of 1935, which forbade marriage between Jews and non-Jews, and forbade Jews from having sexual relations with members of the Aryan race. The Aryans are the Germans, the Scandinavians, and the Dutch. They were considered as part of the Aryan family. All right, so they were satisfied with this, and then they realized they got a bigger problem on their hand, because before Hitler came to power, there was a lot of assimilation in Germany, and thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews had intermarried with non-Jews. Some of them intermarried and they remained Jews. Some of them intermarried and they converted out. So there were tens of thousands of Jews who had converted. They were baptized and they go to church. Some of them were ministers, but they were born Jewish. So the Nazis, this was no problem to them. They decided anyone who was born Jewish, as far as we're concerned, he's a Jew. We don't care if he practices any other religion. We don't care if he's a priest or that. He's a Jew and he can practice any kind of religion. How do we define a Jew? And the answer was, when anyone, we were going by their grandparents, anyone who had 4 Jewish known grandparents, whether religious practicing or not, whether they were registered to the Jewish community or not, but they were known, anyone who has 4 known Jewish grandparents is a Jew, period. Then they took it a step further. Anyone who has 3 known Jewish grandparents, 3, that too is a Jew, period. And nothing can be done about it. The big problem was, if a person has 2 Jewish grandparents and 2 Aryan grandparents, or if a person has 1 Jewish grandparents or 3 Aryan grandparents, then this is what they do. A person who has 2 and 2, he is a Michelin grade A. Grade A, he's 50-50. A person who has 3 Aryan grandparents and 1 Jewish grandparent, he's a Michelin grade B. Now, most of these Michelin people were not practicing Jews. Some of them didn't even know that they had Jewish blood in them, especially someone who had 1 Jewish grandparent and 3 non-Jewish grandparents. You may have been baptized in the church. You may not even have known that he had one of his grandparents was Jewish.
We are on the list, you know. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. Our day was coming.
Right.
That's 100%. It was a law.
These laws were passed gradually. They were passed for the Jews in 33. For the Michelin, they appeared in 1940. At that time, the half-Jews, the Michelin, had been drafted into the army when the war had started in 39. And my brother, who was there together with a friend from Breslau, who was a non-Aryan, not a half-Aryan, but a non-Aryan. So he fled over the Pyrenees to Spain, and from Spain he went to England and saved his life this way. My brother did not dare do that. He wanted to. But since he thought and he knew that he was supposed to go into the army, he was afraid that Hitler, or the Nazis, would take it out of his family if he, as a German potential soldier, is fleeing into another country, is not coming back, so he came back. And they had just passed another law. There was a new law, they didn't want them anymore, so they sent them back, and they did not draft any new ones. But it was a slow degradation of the lifestyle. It was going from worse to worse.
Her brother had contracted tuberculosis in an internment camp in France and recovered well in a sanatorium in Germany. He was on his way to a summer hotel job near the Swiss border, but he disappeared en route. They reported him missing.
The trains were regularly raided by the military and the Gestapo. So one of the two, I'm not sure which, probably the Gestapo, saw his military pass that he had, which identified him as had to. He was a tall, blond guy and stuck out in those days in 43, like a sore thumb, not being in uniform and fighting for his fatherland. So somebody didn't like that, took him out of the train.
He was passed from Gestapo prison to Gestapo prison until they anonymously received a phone call that he was in Breslau. Each of them, including her non-Aryan mother, went to the prison to petition for his release. Finally, one officer told Rosemary that if she came back the next week, he might have some information.
And then he looked at his files and he said, your brother has been shipped to Auschwitz. So I immediately got in touch with my parents, and my father got on the train to go to Auschwitz and rescue his son. Well, he never got to Auschwitz, of course. I mean, they didn't allow tourists or regular persons to live there. So he came back, and then we got a letter from my brother. He was allowed to write. We have 2 letters from Auschwitz. And in the last one that was dated the 4th of July, he did not write the letter himself. It was written in some other's handwriting, but he signed it. And it said, the news about Sean or some other name about his TB breaking out again is very sad, and I hope that he will recover. And we, of course, knew that he was talking about himself. And then several weeks later, my father was ordered to the Gestapo in Breslau and was handed a death certificate that was dated the 8th of July. So he died on the 8th of July, supposedly.
While we worked very hard and also had a limited amount of food, our spirits were relatively good because of the radio reception we had, and we saw that the end of the war is near. When the Russians were as close so that we could hear the cannons, our guards, as well as we decided to move further west, and our guards put us into a heavily wired prison camp, and we thought we were caught in a bad position. We tested the wires and the barbed fences, and found out they were not electrified. So we slept the night there and then went as a group further west. By that time, we walked through forests and heavy snow, and it was physically very draining too after the hard work in the camp to keep on marching through the snow.
And anyway, I went up to a freight car and I collapsed. For 3 days I was on the freight car and I don't know anything what happened there. Anyway, it wound up to be to go to Vienna, around Czechoslovakia. The Russians came again, so we all found a bicycle
Zemlinsky's father was raised Catholic, his maternal grandmother was Muslim, and when he was young, his entire family converted to the religion of his maternal grandfather, Judaism. Zemlinsky converted to Protestantism in 1899. His Turnbachter League, written that year, featured allusions to the cross and text from Psalms. More than colleagues, Zemlinsky and Schoenberg were actually brothers-in-law. Schoenberg was married to Zemlinsky's sister. What inspired me to create this project, this gathering of materials and experiences to explore this issue of identity and conversion, comes from a personal story, my family history, my own story. I hope to inspire my audience to think of these things for themselves in their own families, in their own interior lives. What does it mean to be who we are? How can we see each other in a more compassionate light and not look for binding definitions of each other, but rather opening up and seeing that we're many combinations of many things. It gives us a lot of freedom to explore ourselves and to have greater and deeper understanding for other people. Ultimately, I want to erase lines that divide us and inspire people to feel at peace within ourselves and with each other.
Well, we're going to turn the house lights on, and I wanted to thank Carolyn Enger. We will be glad to take questions. We don't necessarily have the answers, but we will be delighted to have questions. And I can get the ball rolling here a little bit. I wonder if your research led you to know, Carolyn, what % of the population in Germany was considered Mischlinge?
I can give you exact numbers.
We can have exact numbers. This was not a setup, I promise.
So according to, in 1939, the Reich census, there were 72,000 Mischlinge of the first degree, where they had 2 Jewish grandparents, and then 39,000 Mischlinge of the second degree, where they would have had 1 Jewish grandparent. So 40, that's 120,000. So up to 160,000, 1/4, 1/2, and even full Jewish men served in the German army during World War II, and then including there's some generals. This history is just so twisted and convoluted because in a sense, the poster soldier for the Wehrmacht was a Mischling of the second degree. But he was blonde and had blue eyes, and he looked like, he had the look. And so they used him. And then there were generals, especially in the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, where they were very, talented soldiers. And so they weren't kicked out. They were Mischlinge, but they were not kicked out because they, of course, were useful because of their talents. And so, I guess what it really came down to is there are hard and fast rules, and then so really, I don't know if it would even be called loophole. I really feel that because I've read so much and for so long, that it's hard for us. We want to somehow be able to generalize because we want to wrap our minds around it. And we could read and talk until forever, until infinity. There's no way for our minds to for us to wrap our minds around this period in history. And so what I've come to, because of that, in a sense, our minds want to somehow, define something to understand it. And since it's not possible, my posture is that it's really individual stories. It's one by one by one by one. And it's just so vast that it's, of course, we know that the laws were there. The Nuremberg laws were to eliminate all of the Jews. And then you find, it's just, people, one soldier in one situation says, oh, okay, I'm going to overlook this situation. So I don't think that we can say black and white, hard and fast. Of course, we know that the numbers were, 6 million. How do you, but, was it, anyway, so I'm not going to get into how to, I don't think that we can process it. There was a terrific project, a school teacher in Tennessee, and the paper clips. I don't know if you know that story, but they, in order to kind of make it as close as possible to understandable, it became a physical thing where students and their whole school system, the town really got involved. They collected 6 million paper clips to somehow make it a number. I don't know. It's just too vast. Hi, I think you had a question.
Yeah, just on personal interest.
Sure.
Obviously, you identify as Jewish because you went through a conversion ceremony. Why did you feel you had to do that?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. This fellow is saying, obviously I'm identifying Jewishly, and so then why did I feel that I needed to go through the conversion, and it was actually 2 conversions? So then that's even a bigger question, right? Well, because when somebody would ask me, what are you? I'd go into this long explanation of, well, my grandmother was Jewish, but she converted after she married my grandfather, and I wanted a one-word answer. So, and I felt that was really, I don't know, that was how I identified. It felt right in my soul. And with the Reform conversion, anyone who knows somewhat of Jewish law and going to Israel and all, with a Reform conversion, the chief rabbinate in Israel doesn't recognize a Reform conversion. So I had wanted to make, I was thinking about making Aliyah. And so that's why I went through an Orthodox conversion. That way, in a sense, no one could question my Jewish passport. And then I found myself happily in an Orthodox situation where I really enjoy Shabbat and the holidays, and I have a beautiful husband who wouldn't have looked at me had I not been Orthodox. Yeah, I'll answer yours, and then I'll come to your thing.
The music was a perfect accompaniment for the film. Now, my mother's family came from Germany. My grandmother and her brother came here as tourists before the 1900s.
Uh-huh.
They came from the oldest community in Europe, the oldest Jewish community, Baden-Baden, in Germany. It was about 50 to 100 years older than the first Christian was baptized in Europe.
Wow.
The town does not exist anymore the way it was. Now, I have a box of letters that's been handed down in my family. It's written in the old German script. I can't read it, but I have this big box of letters, and it could be translated someday. I think it's probably just personal family information, but all those people are gone. And there's a tintype, a little metal plate, looking down on the Black Forest. My people lived on the edge of the Black Forest. Their nearest neighbor was a Catholic convent. They were successful. They were wood carvers. And I have a chair that was sent to my grandmother's brother when he got married in the United States. It was sent by ship from Germany. It was carved by my ancestors.
Amazing.
Everything ends up with me.
Oh, what an amazing
So
story.
I have the chair and the box of letters, and I don't know what to do with the letters. Maybe the
Oh,
Holocaust Museum.
I would call the Museum of Jewish Heritage and get some support with that.
New York.
Yeah. And you could also call the one in Washington. They're extremely helpful and want to support you in your going through these things. And the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, they have many people there on staff that will be able to help
Some
you.
of the letters are tied up with ribbons.
It sounds amazing, really amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
The Leo Beck Institute is focused on German Jewish history and culture. That's another resource available to you. They're on 16th Street, and they have an affiliation with
The Leo Beck Society, Institute, right, the Leo Beck Institute, right,
affiliation with the Museum of Berlin. So
right.
it's another possible connection.
It's true, absolutely. The Leo Beck Institute it's in the Center for Jewish History on West 16th Street. Yeah. Maybe we can write these things down for you. Hi.
How did your family react when you said that you wanted to
So, thanks for asking. My father was very much against it. He was, and I say the story that anytime I had a conversation with him, could be of anything. You know, we're going to the theater at 8 o'clock. We'll pick you up at 7. We're going out to dinner. We'll pick you up at 5:30. Somewhere in the conversation would be, don't be Jewish. And I argued with him. I argued and argued. I said, well, you know, what's the difference to you if I go someplace on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning? He didn't have an answer for that. And he said, okay, so then don't be on any list. So he was obviously afraid for my physical safety. And I thought, growing up in Tenafly, I thought, well, whatever, you know, I've never been afraid of anything in terms of my physical safety, you know, nothing. I never had any kind of anxiety around my existence. And it was the shooting in Pittsburgh that I was like, oh my gosh, he's right. He was right. I mean, you know, that was a shock to our entire country, right? We'd never had that. So, and then now subsequent. And so I don't know whether this sort of thing happens in waves, that, you know, there's I mean, I'm not enough of a historian. I'm originally, you know, I'm a pianist first and foremost. I'm not enough of a historian to, I mean, you know, there's some peaceful time, and then you know, the people come out from under the rocks and they're filled with hate and venom and do terrible things.
Did he ever accept it?
Do I?
Did he ever accept your dad?
Oh, yeah, especially once he met Mark. Because, I don't know, maybe my husband's, sorry, you can wave your hand. Yeah, I think that maybe he felt that I was in good hands or safer or something. I don't know. I mean, because that, in a sense, it's not logical. It's not rational. Just because I'm married to a good guy who has some kind of, you know, I don't know, energy around him doesn't make it, you know, safer to go to a building and not get shot. You know, God forbid. So, yes, yes. No, he's of Syrian descent. He's Syrian. Yeah. No. I had been thinking about moving to Israel, and then I met him in New York, and I didn't go. I saved myself the trip. Yes, hi.
You may be interested, I came from Germany in 1938 because I had very smart father who got us out of Germany, and luckily had relatives here who allowed us.
They sponsored you.
Sponsored us.
Right.
I have a cookbook, a handwritten cookbook in the German handwriting.
Yeah. You know, again, that would be of interest, I'm sure, to these organizations, you know, especially the Leo Baeck Institute. You're right to have mentioned that. I guess in my longer vision of places that collect materials, I just figure if the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is backed by the United States government, it's less likely to fold than, you know, museums can come and go. But so anyway, that's my own obsession. So the Leo Baeck Institute is certainly a very good place. And there are, you know, there are people here and in Germany, you know, waiting to help and translate and document, and certainly want to meet you and know you. No, of course you do. Of course you do. I mean, in a sense, I don't have children myself, and I have many nieces and nephews. And so I thought, I mean, first of all, I guess my father had wanted to write his memoirs. He had made a few attempts and never got around to it. I think that it may have been too raw and too painful for him, and he really didn't talk about his experiences very much. You know, that you see him at the birthday party, that was sort of like we all got out the camera because we thought, you know, he never really spoke about it, so we wanted to capture it. And I wanted to, after his passing, I wanted to honor him and also tell the story of the Mischlinge, because not very many people know about them. And the Mischlinge themselves, I mean, you saw my godmother, she's very articulate, but for the most part, they were kind of, you know, they're not this, they're not that. They just stayed under the radar. They didn't bring attention to themselves. You know, my godmother she was in school, and the Jewish girls wouldn't play with her, and then the Aryan girls wouldn't play with her. And then she went home to her mother, and she said, why, you know, why? She was, I don't know, young. And so her mother then explained her family history to her. And then as a Mischling, she was then kicked out of school. So my father was... Yes, in Breslau, right, yeah. And so I think his school was also, you know, shortened. He was in part of a rowing club. He was kicked out of a rowing club. They, took the radios away, all these kinds of things. So my godmother, when she says, these laws, their situation was going from worse to worse, because we think here, why didn't somebody leave or do something? I mean, after all, you see what's going on, just leave. But if it's a gradual thing, I don't know, like in our situation here in the United States currently and, and previously, I don't want to get too political, but okay, so there's a shooting and we grieve and speeches are made and we go to ShopRite the next day to get whatever we need, and we hope that things will get better, and we have our families, and we can, continue in our lives. It doesn't sort of say like, boom, okay, now I'm leaving this country. Now I need to get another passport. I mean, it's just, you're very fortunate that your father was wise to leave, because, I mean, let's say if one has elderly parents, it's not so easy to say goodbye. So again, back to what I was saying before, of individual stories that, and luck has a lot to do with it as well. So hi.
Okay.
Yes. You again. Hi again. Thank you.
You're German first and Jewish second.
That's right, yeah.
My grandfather succumbed in the Holocaust. He was
I'm sorry.
the organizer of a national organization for Verein der Juden, der Deutschen des jüdischen Glaubens, which is Germans of the Jewish faith. And they saw it as they had no problem having it equal on both sides.
Right.
It would be just like in America.
Right.
You're an American citizen, like you might be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, whatever.
100%.
So that's a unique perspective of Michigan, I would imagine, because it's not universal. That's in my experience.
100%. Well, I mean, so the in terms of a Mischling now, okay, so there's, to your point, there's plenty of assimilation here in the United States, right? And people intermarry. And so then their kids would be a Mischling. And so then, I mean, according to Nazi terms, right? So, and then in those families, there's probably a conversation of, okay, so how are we going to raise the kids? And are we celebrating both holidays? Are we only doing one thing? Is it confusing for the kids? Is it simple for the kids? All these kinds of things. For Jews in Europe, assimilating was a very kind of different thing, because there's here we have separation of church and state, and there isn't. So in order, let's say in the late 19th century, in order to teach in a university, in order to become a judge, in order to work at a hospital, there are ramifications if you're living in a Christian country. It's easier to get a job if you are a Christian. So, and then you see the quote from Schoenberg and from Mahler, right? Once they converted, and from Heinrich Heine anyway. So he went through the conversion, and then it didn't work out, it didn't work out financially for him anyway. So the other thing that's impossible, I think, for us to wrap our minds around is anti-Semitism, because you say, okay, fine, you're asking me to stand here, and then it'll be okay for you? Okay, so I'll stand here. It's like, no, you're not standing right. Okay, you say, okay, fine, I'll stand right over here, and I'll stand just like this. And no, your trip from here to there wasn't exactly right. It's like, you can't, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And by the way, I wanted to also bring in the fact that Hitler with these, I want to bring into the United States into this as well, because there's those charts that you saw, right, of kind of creating the pure race and not having intermarriage because of this kind of looking for this purity, these miscegenation laws of mixing. Where did Hitler get that from? The United States, okay? and a question of interracial marriage, okay? So, you know, and these laws are still on the books somewhere, you know, somewhere in this country. And, you know, it's just like, that's not how humans work. Humans work where they travel around, they migrate from one place to another, they mix with local, you know, that's what it is.
We're going to have to wrap up.
Oh, I want to say one thing. So there were two more people. Is it okay?
Yeah, we're sort of running a little long.
Oh, okay. All right. That's because I talk. So I wrote a chapter in this book that describes everything that you saw. So you don't get to hear the music in this book, but it's probably more organized. My writing is more organized than my speaking. So it's Women Defying Hitler, if anyone is looking for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me a second. Excuse me. I want to thank you for coming. If you have any questions for Carolyn, we can stay open another 5 or 6 minutes. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your day.